Hello everyone, and a special welcome to all you uncles joining this episode of Versus. I'm your host Mark Ellis, and today on the show, it's a voracious villain vanity affair as I have the vexing task of determining once and for all who is the greatest Spider-Man evildoer to ever walk the earth. Or float above it on a cool jet glider thing. Look, we all know and love Spidey on the big screen, no matter if his true identity is Peter Parker or Miles Morales. And the box office indicates that we don't really care who's playing him, we just want the most web-wicking for our wallet. But when it comes to Spidey's antagonists, we might be a bit more like those moms that prefer Jif peanut butter, because we're choosy.
It's a terrible joke, but thank you for coming.
The list of villainous presences that have been a thorn in Spidey's side is long and distinguished. And before I reveal our starting lineup, I have to first apologize to all those baddies that didn't quite make the cut. Electro, I thought you looked cool, but I only have so much time before Rotten Tomatoes security realizes that, once again, I broke into the studio. Sandman, you're out as well. But the good news is you're only a few pounds of spice away from being a good guy in the next Dune film. Rhino, don't worry. You didn't make the cut, but you'll be referenced off in this episode because I love making fun of you. And the biggest oversight of all, that thief that unceremoniously sent Uncle Ben to the river Styx. I'm an uncle myself, and my nephew wanted to be Spider-Man for this past Halloween. Luckily, I talked him into being Colonel Mustard. And now, here's the starting lineup for your Spider-Man villains. From Spider-Man 1 and 3 and the Amazing Spider-Man 2, Green Goblin. From Spider-Man 2 and Into the Spider-Verse, Dr. Octopus. From Spider-Man Far From Home, Mysterio. From Spider-Man Homecoming, Vulture. From Daredevil, really? The Daredevil Netflix show? Come on, stop, we're doing this? And Into the Spider-Verse, oh right, it's Kingpin. And from North Carolina, but also Spider-Man 3 in his own franchise, number 23, Venom. That's truly a who's who of bad eggs, misguided geniuses, and symbiotic life forms. Not since Batman and Robin have so many villains been crammed into one piece of entertainment. And this vid will probably be just as popular as that 1997 Best Picture winner. Thanks, Razzies. Here's how we'll determine our winner. Round 1, box office. Round 2, Tomatometer/audience score. Round 3, unlimited power. Round 4, iconic moments. And then we'll do a wildcard round that might involve who can drive a truck while mumbling in a thick Russian accent to themselves the best. I kid, I joke, and occasionally I might even elicit a guffaw or a chortle from you, dear viewer. But I'm well aware of how meaningful and important villains have been to Spider-Man lore. After all, what good is a Peter Parker slinging web goo around New York unless he's doing it to combat evil? These nasty folks should be commended for being so evil they forced Spidey's hand, and with it this set-like web substance. And it's also clear to me, your host and judge, that with great power comes great responsibility. Oh, usually after someone says that, they get killed. We'll see how many rounds I make it. Let's get it on. Round 1, box office. Thanks in large part to these villainous presences, Spider-Man movies have been slaying at the box office ever since the first flick bowed in theaters on May 3rd, 2002. My mom's birthday was the day before, but good son that I am, I couldn't get her a gift anywhere close to resembling the bounty that awaited director Sam Raimi and star Tobey Maguire. She got a scarf just in time for summer. That Spidey flick would become the fastest film to cross the $100 million mark at the domestic box office, shattering the record set by the Darth Maul stunt show 3 years prior. The movie wouldn't stop the chugling there, as it went on to nab $821 million in theaters worldwide. Spidey 3 would even top that feat, grossing $895 million. Why did I skip Spider-Man 2? Arguably the best comic book movie ever? Well, because Green Goblin isn't in that one, silly goose. He shows up in part 1 as Norman Osborn, then his kid Harry picks up the mantle in part 3, then a different Harry altogether tried it out for the Amazing Spider-Man 2, which, oh by the way, did $709 million worldwide. It would have been $1 billion if Rhino got to lead the flick, I'm just saying.
You're young. You don't understand how the world works.
Gaudy numbers out of the gate for Double G, as his worldwide total over 3 movies is $2.42 billion, making for a per-flick average of $808 million. That almost $2.5 billion accumulation is still the record for any baddie wanting to take on Spidey. But Dr. Osborn, is he a real doctor, or just one of those PhDs? He'll have some stiff competition from another doc. But first, the also-rans. Look, I love Kingpin and his ultimate dad bod and all the midlife crisis strength in the world, but it can't make up for the fact that he's only in one prominent big screen role, and that was when he was chasing around Ben Affleck in a Daredevil costume. That movie, by the way, still did $555 million worldwide, which shows you just how competitive this match is going to be. Kingpin, you can relax in the green room for now, but you will be a factor later in the ballgame. As for this round, OMG, it's a tag team walking into the ring. Vulture and Mysterio showed up together because they're both in the MCU Spidey films, and might show up again sometime soon.
To Mysterio!
Michael Keaton's Vulture tortured Peter and his high school puppy love aspirations in Homecoming to the tune of $880 million in global bucks. Jake Gyllenhaal's Mysterio upped the ante in Far From Home, which hauled in an astronomical $1.1 billion in Earthling coin. That was a setup, right? He claimed to be from a different Earth, but was actually just some special effects nerd from Paterson, New Jersey.
It's easy to fool people when they're already fooling themselves.
Anyway, both impressed in their one major outing so far, but only one Spidey villain was so popular, he got his own franchise. That's right, the coolest looking character in comic book history, and whose senior quote was that turd in the wind line. Please welcome Venom to the stage. Fans were begging to see Venom in the Sam Raimi trilogy and finally got their wish when Topher Grace, aka alternate Earth Mark Ellis, played Eddie Brock in Spidey 3. And as much as I enjoyed Amnesia Grip James Franco in that film, there's no doubt the majority of that $895 million take was thanks to Venom, not the possibility of another Goblin appearance. Venom then struck out on his own and met his soulmate, Tom Hardy, and the pair's accurately titled film, Venom, debuted in the fall of 2018, making $854 million before it was all said and done. The 2021 sequel, Let There Be Carnage, has grossed a shade under $400 million so far, though at the time of this taping, it's got a few more weeks before it heads to streaming services and your local Blockbuster Video. Shout out Bend, Oregon. Venom is a force to be reckoned with in this round, as he's the only other villain besides Green Goblin to notch a total raking of over $2 billion, and the dude sports an impressive $716 million per movie average. And finally, the Doctor is in. That's the good news. Bad news is he's the Doc with, 4 or 8 arms or legs or limbs? It's Dr. Octopus, and said foe made their sinister debut in Spider-Man 2 and also showed up in Into the Spider-Verse. Spidey 2 saw Doc Ock played by Alfred Molina, and it was the great Kathryn Hahn voicing Dr. Olivia Octavius in the Spider-Verse. Both iterations helped usher in boffo box office, making for a combined $1.16 billion for a per-film take of $582 million. And as much coin as that is, this round has come down to a 2-horse race, one of whom has a cool hover glider contraption thing. Green Goblin has enjoyed the spoils of comic book warfare by being a pest for both Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield, and as such, has the highest total and per-film average of any villain in contention. But Venom was also in a Tobey Spidey before pulling a Peter Gabriel and going solo, and Eddie Brock was a much bigger draw than Harry Osborn by the time Sam Raimi's last Spidey flick came out. Hey, we might get another Raimi Spider guy when his Doctor Strange movie comes out, right? Man, the MCU, the gift that keeps on giving. The fact is, no other baddie could have opened their own movie, much less done a franchise, with anywhere near the success sported by Venom. His one outing in a Spider movie was competitive with the 2 MCU arachnid films thus far, and as much as I respect Double G, if it's just him on the poster, I'm probably renting it at a Redbox outside 7-Eleven. Venom takes round 1 and goes up on all the other villains 1-0.
Get out.
Round 2, Tomatometer/audience score. It's a big W for Venom, especially in a matchup that's only 5 rounds long, and we have 6 villainous entities competing. After consulting with a classroom of Algebra 2 students,
Brilliant but lazy.
that means that after today's match, at least one baddie will be empty-handedly walking home, or to the nearest bar to drown their sorrows with Rhino. But now it's Venom who has the honor, which is golf speak for, you get to go first. But that could be a dubious honor for old Eddie Brock, because this round is all about what the critics and fans had to say after they saw your flick. The good part for Venom is that dude's got 2 movies that are fresh on the Tomatometer. The bad part is the highest rated film of his is only barely deodorized at 63%. You wanna guess which one? Oh wait. It's Spider-Man 3! Is Rotten Tomatoes wrong about that? Roxy Stryer clearly thought so when she was a guest on our podcast, and she's a Boston sports fan, so she knows how to light up a scoreboard. Venom's first solo foray was very rotten, landing at just 30% on the Tomatometer, but Let There Be Carnage has rebounded thus far with a current 60% fresh number. The audience score is better news, especially for 2018's Venom. It's at 81%, and the sequel is even higher at 84%. Problem is, lots of people saw Spider-Man 3, and they weren't as thrilled about seeing me play the role. Its audience score is rotten at 51%. Overall, the character is still fresh according to the audience, averaging 72% per movie. The long-tongued one heads down south to Rotten Town with a 51% average on the Tomatometer. To further rub salt in the wound, it's okay, he can kind of heal himself, right? Can all comic book characters do that to some degree? Venom is the only villain who has any rotten average on either metric. Even Kingpin wasn't too weighed down by the theatrical Daredevil film, and his averages are 77.6 in the tomato patch and 72% in the audience's garden. I'll workshop that term. I know a tune called Octopus's Garden, and even the Beatles would marvel at how prolific Doc Ock has been on the big screen. 2 flicks, and both are as super fresh as the Fab Four when they debuted on The Ed Sullivan Show. Into the Spider-Verse got all the audiences loving with a 93%, and the critics loved it even more with a 97% Tomatometer score. Spider-Man 2 is at a fresh 93% with the critics, and an 82% with the audience score, thus making for a per-flick average of 95% and 87.5% respectively. Green Goblin can't follow that lead, but he's at least fresh on both averages. Norman and Harry combined for a 68.3% per flick score on the Tomatometer and a 60.6% average on the audience side of things. Thanks, Amazing Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man 3. The one-off villains are the real threats to Professor Squid here. Mysterio dominates both metrics with a 90% fresh on the Tomatometer and a 95% on the audience score.
See, that wasn't so hard.
Vulture balances him out perfectly with a 92% Tomatometer freshness and then a rosy 87% for the audience score, which begs the question, can Michael Keaton and Jake Gyllenhaal do Bubble Boy 2 together?
No.
Please?
You're still on that? I told you, no. The answer is no. Forget it.
But those are only one movie per villain, whereas Dr. Octopus set a new standard in good intentions gone bad back in 2004, and Doc Ock was a super fun addition once we fell into the Spider-Verse. And although your host, who loves Men's Warehouse,
You and I are not so different.
hasn't seen the new Spidey flick yet, I saw the trailer, and Doc Ock is helping sell that movie in a major way, which is going to be more than enough to award them the win in round number 2. Medical degree or not, Ock has 1 point, Venom has 1 point, and everyone else feels like a certain something rolling down the street in the wind. Round 3, unlimited power. There's really nothing better in this world than raw, untamed power. Unless, of course, you've been able to harness that potential into a precise, evil scheme that could put the very fate of the universe at stake. Villains love their special abilities just as much as our superheroes. The only difference is when these baddies flex their mean muscle, it could spell doom for us.
Fire all the drones now!
That's a very loose us because we're the audience. And sure, we like the innocent bystanders we're watching on the big screen to pull through, but part of what makes us ooh, ah, and shove popcorn into our face is that these heralded villains bring so much to the playing field. So who's got the best powers? Let's start with you, Rhino. Hey, look at you, driving a truck, angry and fast. Look out, old ladies crossing the street. Kingpin gets major points in this round simply because of what he has done.
I killed Spider-Man.
It's true. In my favorite Spider-themed flick of all time, Into the Spider-Verse, Kingpin manages to off a Spidey, and in doing so, flexes his supervillain muscle, which is, it's muscle, but he's definitely on a protein and carb loading phase because he's bulky all the way around and has been since we saw Michael Clark Duncan first portray him in 2004's Daredevil. Vincent D'Onofrio also brought a lot of mass to the Netflix series, and it served him well in jail. That and a tremendous amount of pure rage. Very few things can soften his inner demons, and high schoolers named Peter are not one of them. While Kingpin would win a powerlifting contest in any Gold's Gym around the world, Venom's powers are largely not of this earth. The alien symbiote that becomes BFFs with Eddie Brock is capable of alien features like super strength, speed, and the enviable ability to bite off heads. Venom is also a good listener occasionally, at least when his other half is giving the instructions. He can inflict damage in a variety of ways, including just as Eddie. Topher Grace's portrayal of the classic Spidey anti-hero shows us a competitive photojournalist who, dare I say, may be better at taking snapshots than Peter Parker. Come on, you know it's true. Look, I root for the kid, but he ain't exactly Annie Leibovitz. As for Mysterio, now we're talking. He's got the greatest powers of anyone in the field today, if the question is, who's the front runner at a job interview for Lucasfilm? While he's in good shape, pulls off the costume incredibly well, and has a neck that's capable of stabilizing that fishbowl on top of his noggin, most of Mysterio's abilities are an illusion. So he might lose a fisticuffs with Venom or Kingpin in a UFC cage match.
I don't know, you're probably right about that.
But his tomfoolery and trickery are so intricately planned out that he fooled a host of intelligent people in places like jolly old Old England. And that's where Oxford University is. They don't let dummies in there. I'm not even allowed to set foot on the campus with my Wake Forest 2.1 GPA.
Your parents must be very proud.
And he really threw Spider-Man for a loop. Mysterio is a valid foe in this round because outsmarting your opponent and being able to sell tickets in Vegas are a valued commodity. And as we look at our roster so far, it seems like Vulture might be the best combination of all of these abilities. Michael Keaton's portrayal brings us the old man strength of a Kingpin, the illusionary skills of Mysterio, and the extraterrestrial tech of a Venom. And the best part, he can drive almost as angrily as Rhino. Vulture earned that moniker from flying, which is something most daddies of high school kids can't do without a plane ticket. But he has Chitauri weaponry, recovered and restored from him and his team after the New York battle seen in the climax of the Avengers. He can fly with his suit, and those power cells make him a formidable enemy to all superheroes, including Tony Stark, with whom he has a personal vendetta. Oh, and when he goes up against Spidey, it's not just villain versus hero, it's daddy versus boy dating my little girl. And Pete, as a guy who's been in your shoes, have her home by 10 p.m. Of all the different goblins we see battle Sir Parker, it's Norman Osborn that would appear to pose the biggest threat. Although I'll give points to Harry because he's the one that ultimately ended Gwen's bid for romance. Norm and Dr. Octavius are similar creatures. They're brainiacs who might mean well, but go way too far in their pursuit of scientific advancement. Green Goblin gains the ability to zip around on a hovercraft, Otto grows some new appendages and becomes the first octopus ever to survive on land for more than 14 minutes. They also both harbor that intimidating teacher-student stronghold over Peter Parker. It's tough enough to take on a run-of-the-mill bad guy. It's even worse when it's someone with whom you've had a positive interaction with. That same feeling might extend to James Franco's portrayal of Harry in Spider-Man 3, because now Spidey has to deal with someone who was his best friend. But for all the untold ability housed by Venom, the patriarchal tyranny of a Kingpin, a Goblin or an Octopus, or the funkle betrayal of Mysterio, I'm going with Vulture.
Hot dog.
Yes, I love me some Michael Keaton, and we can feel every bit of his internal rage in that performance. But it's also the perfect melding of every other villainous power in play. Alien tech, aged man angst, and a personal discrepancy with Spider-Man. Now, I might have considered Vulture even if he was happy-go-lucky Adrian who was concerned his baby was dating some scrawny kid like Peter Parker. Now, if we toss in the Chitauri Blue Lightning stuff, that's a done deal. Vulture gets the point and is on the board. It's a three-way tie for the lead between Vulture, Venom, and Doc Ock. Round 4, iconic moments. Now let's have some fun. After all, what good are those alien tools and rage and muscles if they just sit idly by for 2 hours, or sometimes 2 hours and 45 minutes with post-credit scenes? Let's take all that potential and put it to real use in the round that will only reward the coolest fight scenes, the baddest villain snarls, and the thickest of Russian accents. All joking aside, whatever scenes I reference or moments that you see play over my handsome face, don't tell Harry. I'm kidding, that's the final line uttered by Green Goblin after yet another epic clash betwixt him and Spidey. It's an emotional resolution that hits Peter hard, and the look on Parker's face through his tattered mask hits home with audiences. I love this moment because it showed the world we can get attached to heroes and villains, and whoever wins, we're gonna feel some level of emotion for the loser. Of course, Goblin didn't lose every fight he had with the web slinger. Their first bout is epic, and the lack of musical accompaniment really means something. Spider-Man looks a lot more like Spider-Boy here, as he's clearly outwitted by a more experienced veteran opponent. And even when the neighborhood guy is on the ground, it's not always going to end well. Gwen Stacy isn't just in concussion protocol after that climactic clash with Dane DeHaan's Green Goblin in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, she's a goner. The action flies fast and makes Dennis Leary furious with the outcome, but amidst all the punches and athleticism and swelling music, it's still the sound of Stacy's head hitting the concrete that gets me every time. Dr. Octopus owns at least one iconic moment we can all recall. That train fight, it's still so damn cool. The stakes, the imagination, the speed at which the clash is occurring. The battle's one of the key reasons that you could argue Spidey 2 is still the best comic book film of all time. But for me, equally as awesome would be the bank fight and the Super Collider War in Into the Spider-Verse. Olivia has an absolute ball when she's revealed to be the new Doc Ock in town. In my humble opinion, the best scenes of any owned by the good, bad doctor are the ones that clearly indicate the horror background that director Sam Raimi had. Witness the classic Monster Lab experiment gone wrong moment, and then when Otto wakes up and he's got the arms, but his arms already woke up, people died. Kingpin might be the most inspirational to me, amateur weightlifter Mark Ellis. I may not be invited to Muscle Beach this summer, but seeing Kingpin put up Bruce Willis in unbreakable bench press numbers is just as motivational as watching a Rocky training montage. Of course, he's getting in shape for much more nefarious purposes. Prison riots are just for fun. For real kicks, how about a decapitation or subverting fans' hopes by offing reporter Ben Ulrich in his own home? You're not safe from this guy anywhere. Kingpin's had many memorable duels with Daredevil, but in Into the Spider-Verse, the final fight is brutal, and once again, he kills Spider-Man. No one else in competition today can put that in their obituary. Venom may not care to, as he's never been painted as the arch nemesis to Spider-Man like some of these others have. But that doesn't mean we don't get plenty of great sequences, starting with any instance of the symbiote and Eddie Brock having an argument. It's great fun checking out the couple-like bickering in Tom Hardy's run, and as great as that final clash in 2018's Venom is, I might love the zaniness of the lobster restaurant scene even more. You want to know the tone this franchise is going for? You'll find it in the lobster tank. Let's also let the suit itself have some fun. Anyone want to go dancing? Ooh, this divided fans in the theater opening day and 14 years later still raises eyebrows. But the round is called Iconic Moments, and the Jazz Club emo Spidey sequence certainly has staying power. Mysterio may have been a one and done, or maybe not, but boy, what a show. The elemental fights in Far From Home are a visual effects hoot from start to finish, and Jake Gyllenhaal's ginormous puppy dog eyes lend an extra sense of gravitas when he broham chats with Peter. Parker's clearly searching for both himself and a new father figure at the same time, and the quiet conversations he has with Quentin Beck.
My name is Mysterio.
Hold true weight, even if it's all a load of crap. Go back and watch the bar scene where Peter misguidedly hands over the magic Tony Stark glasses. It's great for two reasons. One, even we the audience are buying the BS that Mysterio is selling, and two, how funny is it to see a full-on superhero costume on a guy swilling a Budweiser? Man, I miss San Diego Comic-Con. See y'all July 2022. Intimate convos between a mentor and mentee are nice, but awkward get-to-know-you chats are even more fun in a tense car ride to the big dance. Vulture and Spidey have some awesome battle sequences, but none are more personal or chess-like than the war of words and rear-view mirror eye-darting that ensues when Daddy gives MJ and her new boy a lift to the fish under the sea soiree. Oh, and that epic fairy fight? Vulture proves his worth in the pantheon of movie baddies when he slices a huge watercraft in half and is such a threat that Iron Man has to swoop in just to match wits. Fun fact time, our own expert researcher Mark Hoffmeyer was on that boat. Oh, sorry, I read that wrong. Okay, so I'm being told the fight itself was fictional, but the Hoff worked on that movie and saw the ship being built on the studio lot in Atlanta. Congrats on your World Series, ATL. Hammer and Hank would be proud. Vulture and Mysterio's combination of death-defying stunts and meaningful mano-a-mano chats make a strong case in this round, but they only had one flick so far to get all that in. And while Homecoming and Far From Home are both great, Spider-Man 2 has been elevated into Mount Olympus movie status because of the might of Doc Ock. And Olivia Octavius in Into the Spider-Verse, speaking of Mount Olympus flicks, seals the deal. The Doctor is in with another win in round 4 and takes the outright lead. 2-1 to 1 to 0-0 to Rhino. And now it's time for the Wildcard Round, Ark of the Covenant. Even if the classic Ark is spelled with a K and is currently being examined by top men. Top men. This very average boy who is barely a man now hosts the Wildcard Round that will take a deep dive into the backstory, villainous heights, and ultimate resting place of these ne'er-do-wells competing today. Who is truly the most interesting villain Spider-Man has ever gone against? Vulture and Kingpin have both made that neighborhood hero decidedly less friendly, and both are fueled by the rage sewn into their genetic makeup by their past lives. For Kingpin, it was a brutal upbringing at the hands of a mafia, Kingpin. Daddy would come home and take out his angst on the family until little Kingpin did what became a habit, he killed the guy. Yep. Once you off your old man, it's game on for whoever wants a piece next. But by all accounts, Adrian Toomes was less in need of a mental health expert, that is until his salvage company in charge of cleaning up the Big Apple after the Interstellar War and the Avengers is driven out of business by Stark Enterprises. You'd think Tone would at least invite them to the social media friendly party they have at the outset of Age of Ultron, but no. They didn't even get a Christmas card. The good news for fans of these two villains is that they're in the slammer, but still alive and kicking. Unless you're the movie version of Kingpin, because you got your legs pretty banged up. As it stands, Vulture is in prison, but maybe not for long. Venom is positively thriving at the moment, in large part because he's the hero of his own story, and I gotta say, getting swallowed up by alien goo may have been the best thing that ever happened to Eddie Brock. Now this flailing investigative journalist has a story, better yet, he's living his own scoop. It's alternately hilarious and horrific, and nothing short of endearing to us, the audience. But when Venom was a true thorn in Spider-Man's side, all the hype turned into a whimper by the end of Spider-Man 3. Mysterio's backstory may have packed an emotional wallop if we hadn't just seen a similar version with Vulture. This time it was a one-time employee of Tony Stark who felt betrayed after getting canned and decided to join forces with newly unemployed Stark Enterprises refugees. It's nonetheless compelling, but Mysterio is at his devilishly best when his own confidence is what gets the best of him, or when he's spilling the beans about Spidey's real identity to J. Jonah Jameson. Somewhat similar to Quentin Beck and Adrian Toomes, both Norman Osborn and Otto Octavius weren't always a-holes hell-bent on mass destruction. They were both in a rush to get their experiments to the finish line, and in doing so, made themselves part of the process. In Norman's case, he had the military pull its funding of Oscorp in favor of another contract with rival company Quest. I know them well, and my favorite flavor is cookies and cream. Otto and his better half are employed at Oscorp in Spider-Man 2, and they're working on a powerful reactor project that will help humanity, but in a lab accident. You know, there's really a criminal lack of safety checks in comic book laboratories. Mrs. Octavius dies, and Otto is left with these nutcase appendages attached to him. Villainy ensues. But I was always kind of rooting for Otto, weren't you? Not so much for Norman, which might make Norman the better villain, but going back to Otto, look, I can understand descents into madness. Otto fought it hard, and Olivia makes it hilarious in Into the Spider-Verse. Norm seems like he's been secretly waiting for this opportunity his whole life, and he whacks a high-ranking military officer just as his opening salvo. Goblin's villainy is further intensified by the Friends Forever pact that we thought his son Harry and Peter had, and then when yet another Goblin ends Gwen's run at life, it becomes a done deal. Both characters had the luxury of their backstory told in riveting, in-depth fashion that made us care about them before they turned to the dark side. But Goblin packed a little more emotional punch to Peter, and that's what gets them the edge in the Wildcard Round. Goblin takes it, and we're tied at the top, 2-2.
This is a breakthrough beyond your father's dreams.
Thank you.
Which means I have the thankless task of choosing one of these two great villainous entities as my winner today. It's a lot of pressure, and you'd think I could avoid this weight, as I am the guy who writes these TED Talks.
Can you just fast forward to the end?
Both baddies start out friendly, then get super dark, then have a redemptive moment towards the end. Because after all, the best villains are the ones that thought they were the good guy. But the tales of Ock and Goblin end with a slight difference. Goblin loses to Spidey and dies. Meanwhile, Doc Ock chooses to sacrifice himself after coming out of a wicked coma, which makes his nefarious return possibility in a future Spider-Man film all the more tempting, and we get to see another incarnation in Olivia, so I go with Dr. Octopus as my winner. Octopi all around the world, celebrate.
Oh, Rosie, I love this boy.
Well, we had fun today, and that was a tough call there at the end, but of course, it's just my opinion. And I'm only one man, at least until the Spider-Verse opens back up and an alternate Earth Mark shows up to usurp my power and maybe star in that 70s show. Fun fact, I met Topher Grace at Chipotle one time, and we became besties. No joke, we ordered the same exact burrito. Same meat, beans, rice, fixins, and we both were okay with the extra charge for guac. Okay, versus verse. Now it's your turn. Who you got as your favorite Spider-Man foe? Let your voice be heard by hitting me up on social media. I'm at Mark Ellis Live on Twitter and Instagram. Be sure to check back here at Rotten Tomatoes for more episodes. And until next time, in the words of a great uncle, with great power comes, I don't want to say it because I know what happens next. I'm just going to end the show.